Hello, and welcome to the beginning of the Stone Age. If you don't know what's going on, my name is Cannonball, and this is my forever world. In this world, I have to progress through the stages of human civilization, rather than just surviving normally. For example, last episode, we began in the Caveman era and made some primitive builds and monuments. This episode, however, it's time to conquer the Stone Age. In this era, we're finally able to use some real building blocks, make some primitive housing, and of course, use stone tools. So right now I'm going to head out, grab some logs, and begin making those. With that, my goals for this era are a lot more strenuous. I want to make a full settlement, I want to create like a communal fire area, establish some more paths to expand our territory, establish some primitive storage as well, and finally, I want to make another monument to commemorate this era. But before any of that can happen, I do need to make our official entrance into the Stone Age by crafting our very first stone tools. Anyways, it's time to start getting materials for the settlement, which also means it's time-lapse time. For this settlement, I'm really picturing it looking more like a village. Not a Minecraft village, but something more like, small houses, big houses, and maybe one kind of village leader's home, which could look really nice. But while I was looking for these homes, I actually found this page by, I found this page where there's some really cool ancient looking houses that I thought were really era fitting, but also very Minecraft fitting. They have kind of that fantasy feel, but they are still attainable materials for the Stone Age, so I really want this village to be inspired by those. As well, the valley I'm clearing out right now I think is actually the perfect location for this village. We have two mountains right next to each other, which I think look really nice to frame this village, and then we also have access to water on all sides. But now, with the valley cleared out, storage is really starting to become an issue. So I headed over and made our next major advancement in the Stone Age, which is storage. For the storage, I went with barrels because I feel like they look the most era accurate compared to a chest. With that though, it was time to get back to work, and this time we're terraforming. For the terraforming, I really wanted to work on smoothing out the area, but not necessarily just completely flattening it. I think having some natural ridges and kind of rises and falls in the terrain will make it feel a bit more natural and definitely still more era accurate. That said though, there were some pretty extreme hills and, divots in this area, so I had to smooth that all out. I spent a lot of this time thinking about where I want the settlement to actually be and also where I want the buildings in the settlement to be. And I decided that the mountain that we have our cave in might actually be the perfect home for the village leader's home. I think this nice, big, open area leading up to the village leader's house could make for a really grand entrance. Along with that, I think our central campfire area should also be smack dab in the middle of this with some houses surrounding it. I think that'll make the most sense logically and aesthetically. After way too many hours of terraforming, we reached this point, and I actually think it looks really good. I think the gentle ridges really accentuate the shape of this valley, and I think it'll be the perfect home for our settlement. So with that, my next step is to do the city layout, but before that can happen, I actually noticed a skeleton horse off to the right, to which I didn't really know what to do because this was before humans were domesticating horses or anything like that, so I decided to just kill the skeleton and go about my day without taking the skeleton horse, unfortunately. Still cool though. Afterwards, it was time to start laying out what I wanted the settlement to look like. First thing is I wanted to lay out the area where I want the central campfire. I'd say this is arguably the most important structure of the settlement because I want everything to kind of form around it and make it the highlight of this build. Besides that though, I was just laying out some general shapes of houses that I want to do on these different layers. Nothing super specific, but I do think it's a good start. After that though, I did head back to the cave to be in for the night, and we actually ran into our good friend the Wandering Trader again. Just thought I'd throw it out there that he showed up right before we were about to build the houses. Enough procrastinating though, it's time to get to work on house number 1. And when deciding which one to make, I just decided to go with the corner property. If you guys don't know, I have always kind of struggled with building corner or diagonal houses in Minecraft, since it doesn't quite make sense in my head. But for this one, I threw down some wooden frames and some cobblestone to give it kind of that rough Stone Age look, and then decided that the best fit for a roof, since I can't do hay bales quite yet, would just be dirt. I do hope that it'll eventually become grass and I'll be able to bone meal it to make it look a bit more natural, but for right now all I can do is craft some slabs and stairs and put a campfire in the middle to give it some texture and depth. Overall though, I am pretty happy with the result. Up next is the neighbor's house, where I also had a pretty weird shaped lot. This one was more of like an L, but it still kind of had that curvature, which I almost kind of wanted to embrace at this point. I feel like Stone Age housing wouldn't have been perfect, square, or anything remotely close to it, more so kind of just thrown together with tons of logs and rocks, so I tried to embrace that by throwing together the wooden frame, the cobblestone, and of course the dirt roof. Then of course it had to become night, so I came back the next day to finish the details. For those, I actually went in with a cobblestone wall on the left, which is something new that I'm trying, where basically the wall becomes kind of almost a half slab in the middle of the stone, and I think it looks really good. Haven't used the technique before, but I do really like it. But in addition to that, I'm using stairs and slabs to give it that kind of rugged, rocky look that I was going for. After that, it was time for the roof, so I added some slabs and stairs to keep adding that rugged, rocky unevenness to the build. In addition to that, I actually connected the two builds to make it feel a bit more natural, but the two together look really solid. Before we move on to the next house though, I wanted to head back to the campfire and make sure everything still felt walkable and kind of cohesive. Something I really want to focus on is building intentionally, and I think that could really add to the realism of this world. So the next day, to do just that, I added some paths in front of the house that link the two together. I don't want to path out the whole area yet because I don't know exactly where the buildings are going to be, but at least just getting this down gives me a general idea of where the roads are going, kind of how they lead, and where they'll end up. So for these, I went ahead and did the normal path blocks with some cobblestone slabs. Eventually, I would like to add some podzol and coarse dirt, but right now our resources are a little limited, so I don't think I can. But in addition to just doing the paths, I was also able to do the roofs. And for these, I actually had some extra bones laying around from killing skeletons, so I bone mealed them, and I think it turned out really nice. I think it adds a ton of life to the build, tons of depth, and some really nice shapes to add to that overall dirt rock structure. Here's the final result of the two together, and I think they're starting to look really solid. For house number 3, I actually designed it in creative. I based it off one of those fantasy house drawings that I showed earlier, but I didn't really know how to bring it into survival, so I actually ended up using the Lightmatica mod. If you don't know, pretty much all it does is bring in a schematic of your build, and then you have to build it yourself using survival materials. But what this does is prevents me from having to take a picture with my phone, set it next to my monitor, and recreate it. So after messing with it for a bit, I finally got the placement down and began building. If you can't tell, this build is inspired by a tree stump. So what I like to imagine is that there was a giant tree here at one point that naturally fell because of lightning or something like that, which left it hollow and cut in half. So it then became the perfect home for a Stone Age caveman like me. But either way, what I did was I added some stone add-ons to the outside that made it look accessible enough for a caveman to have built. In addition, as you can see, I did use oak fences, which I was kind of undecided on because technically we aren't allowed to use fencing yet to hold in animals or anything like that, but in this sense I was using it as kind of like a small version of the log, so I didn't think it mattered too much since it's not actually holding in anything or being used to secure people or animals or anything like that. Right here though, I did actually end up running out of logs, so I went and grabbed the rest of them and added the finishing touches to the build. Overall, I am really happy with how this build turned out. I think it adds that fantasy kind of Minecraft-y vibe to an otherwise pretty realistic world. After building the treehouse though, I was kind of stuck for house number 4. It looked really nice, but it didn't really match the other side, so I was trying to figure out how I could tie it into this whole area. But then I had a realization. What better thing to put next to a tree stump than the rest of the tree? So I designed a log-shaped house and got to work. For this house, I really wanted to try and capture the motion in this build and kind of make the log appear as if it was sinking into the ground and was a bit overgrown, as if it had fallen years before. So I went ahead and built a general log structure, but as you can see, it's kind of tapering into the ground. I also put a campfire in the middle, so it's still livable, but I think overall the shape of this build is really interesting and kind of catches your eye. After that, I did a dirt roof to give it that grass kind of mossy overgrown look you might see in a forest. I had to add an interior, of course, but after that I got to zoom out and look at the two together as a whole. I think once the grass is on the roof of the log house, it'll really add to the overall aesthetic of this build and give it that overgrown feel. After those though, I noticed this glaring gap in between the two sides of houses that I built, so I decided that's where we were going to build our next house. For this one, I wanted to combine the style of the two tree houses and the kind of dirt and cobblestone houses. So for that, I went in with wooden fences and some more prominent logs so that it kind of tied the two together subtly. Along with that, I did the standard dirt roof so that it did kind of blend in with the right a little bit more, because I do want to put a path in between the tree house and this one. But overall, I am really happy with how it turned out. I think once the roof is grown over with the grass and we can throw some bone meal on it, it'll really tie this whole area together. But with that done, here is the final result. The next day, I was looking at the settlement. I realized that this area was lacking life. So I went in with all the greenery that I had collected from terraforming the area and kind of just went crazy. I added some oak saplings on the left, which I do have a plan for that I'll have to explain a bit later once they grow. But other than that, this was mostly flowers and bone mealing everywhere I possibly could, kind of tapering it to fit in between the cracks of the houses, but overall I'm really happy with how it turned out. Now that we have all the main houses done though, I decided it's finally time to build the central campfire. I wanted this build to be the focal point of this entire village. To me, I think having a giant kind of monument looking fire in the middle could really set the tone for this whole thing and give it kind of that fantasy vibe. So I decided to go for a look where it's tons of logs kind of leaning against one another with some supporting logs in the middle. I actually put 9 campfires in the center of it to make it this huge kind of bonfire looking thing. But overall, I think it looks really interesting. It's definitely something I haven't built before, and I like how it turned out. I think it is kind of large compared to the rest of the village, but I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Up next, we need to build the villager leader's house, which is gonna require some terraforming. So it's time-lapse time. For this build, I really want to make sure it stands out. Being the villager leader's house, I want it to be the most high effort and kind of high technology for the era. The other ones have kind of just been built into the ground with a dirt roof, and I really want this one to stand out with some oak logs and cobblestone and maybe avoiding a dirt roof. But overall, here's the result of the terraforming, and it was time to get to work. Before we could though, I did need to get a ton of cobblestone, and this area I've been mining cobblestone has kind of gotten way too big and has an enderman in it, but anyways, had to get that done and we were able to start building. So like I was saying, I really wanted to make this build stand out, and to do that I tried to use literally as much texture as possible. As you can tell on the outside, pretty much all the cobblestone is either a stair or a slab or a wall or some variation of that. And then as well, I added these 3 spires to the top, which I think look really nice and kind of give it that unique look. And here is that final result. The only issue is though that when you look at it from the ground, you can barely see it. So I began terraforming. And for this, initially I was going to give it just a large kind of grass lead up, but it felt a little boring. I was really interrupted by some phantoms, but the next day I came back and I decided I actually wanted to expose a bit of the rock face that had been hiding under the grass. So I got to work on carefully carving it out, because once the stone was broken, I couldn't exactly replace it since I'm only allowed to use cobblestone and don't have a furnace yet. After that, I made sure that the pathway up to the house was completely clear, and then went back with some diorite actually that I had gotten from terraforming and added some layers into the stone to give it the appearance of like multiple minerals being in the rock. Here's the final result though from the ground, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think the rock layers turned out super nice from this perspective because you can't quite see the full block, but it's just enough to give you the impression that they're there. And as soon as you get up the long pathway, the view from up here is awesome. I'm really happy with how this is looking. Now that the village leader house was completely done, I decided I really wanted to make this area feel more together. And to start, I wanted to circle back to the trees that I had planted earlier. But I didn't want them to be just regular trees. I don't know if you've noticed, but Minecraft's trees are kinda boring. And I wanted to do some custom trees. The only issue is that I can't get shears right now since we're just in the Stone Age. So what I found out is if you dig down 3 logs and plant another sapling within a tree, you get just enough leaves to cover it up and you can kind of shape it into whatever leaf shape that you want. So it's essentially carving a custom tree out of 2 trees? I don't really know, but I like the idea, and so I'm going to apply that in the world. As soon as I got to the world, I went ahead and tried it on this first tree. Immediately I ran into the problem of that once I placed down the dirt in the sapling, I had no way to get out but breaking the leaves. Once they're broken, I can't exactly get them back, so I had to break this first one. I broke it on the back of it so that hopefully you don't really see it. And then went on to the second one where I thought I was a bit more seasoned at this. Thought, oh, I'm going to go down here maybe and place it or something like that. I had to go to the ground, place the dirt, go back up and place the sapling. And then I realized that while the logs were broken, the leaves were rapidly deteriorating. So I had to go in with bone meal on both of them. I mean, look at this one. It's like destroyed. So I went in with the bone meal and I don't think it turned out that bad. I think I can work with it. So went ahead and did that second one. In total, I got 3 done before it started thunderstorming. So I went ahead and started to try and carve out these trees. However, there was 4 phantoms attacking me. There was a lightning striking. There was thunder going on. It was by far the most stressful tree building experience I had ever had. But I do think they look pretty good. The sun is finally out, and today I want to revisit the checklist. So if we look at our list, it looks like we've gotten done the central fire, some of the settlement, some of the paths, and a bit of the storage. So I think our next step will be working on a structure in between the villager leader house and this mountain on the right, so that we can round out the full settlement. It took me a while to decide, but I landed on a fence to put in between this area. I think having the rustic looking wooden fence keeps it accurate to the era, but also closes in the settlement and makes it feel a lot more complete. After some trial and error with the entrance, I also went back and added some oak fences on top of it to give it more of a jagged look. Here is the final result at night, and I really do like how it turned out. The only issue though is that there are no sort of paths in between there and the village. At that point, it was supposed to cut to a time lapse of me building some paths around the village, but I died. I was out looking for firefly bushes and killing some skeletons to get bone meal to kind of fill up the area. And yeah, skeleton shot me into a creeper. I was already at 5 hearts. It exploded. I died. Either way, I have no idea where the house is since I haven't been using coordinates this whole time, trying to keep it as realistic as possible. So I did end up getting some firefly bushes on the way back, and then I saw smoke. So thank God for campfires and thank God for a giant render distance, because otherwise I genuinely don't know if I would have made it home. I did also manage to find all of my stuff before it despawned, so now let's get back to it. For the paths, it was more of the same with just dirt paths and then also some cobblestone slabs. But I wanted to make sure every house had a walkable path to get to it with a nice entry, and as well I wanted to add firefly bushes anywhere where I felt like it was going to be a little dark. But with all of the paths done, this to me is really starting to look like a settlement. Just doing a walkthrough at sunset, you can see how we've transformed from a primitive caveman era with some simple monuments and fires all the way to a more refined Stone Age. We've got complete paths, we have our central campfire, we have our villager leader house, which looks amazing at this time of night. We have our central campfire, like I said, we have paths leading to each house, like our log house, our tree house, and our other dirt huts that all kind of form this small little settlement that still feels very attainable for the Stone Age. But with all of that done, it's finally time to cross off full settlement and more paths. All we have left to do in this era is establish a space for storage and make a monument. For storage so far, I had everything kind of shoved in the corner with some barrels, but I really want to make this world as realistic as possible. And by that, I mean I want to have storage in the areas where it makes sense for certain items that belong there. So for example, I went to the most overgrown and farming looking house to put all of my flowers and saplings and things that kind of have to do with nature in there. Then for all my blocks, I wanted to put those up at the villager leader's house. So I went over to grab baby zombie, baby zombie, baby zombie. Anyways, I wanted to put all the blocks in the villager leader's house because I do believe that's where I'll be living and I want to do most of my construction projects out of there, so I headed up and put a barrel up there. So now that we have all of our blocks stored, we have officially conquered storage in the Stone Age. All we have left to do now is come up with some sort of monument that can commemorate this era. And for that, I was doing a lot of research online into what Stone Age art looked like, and it turned out that most of it is actually just cave paintings. Most notably, it was all animals that they were hunting and gathering. So as I was actively hunting and gathering for food, I realized it might be fitting to build an animal statue. And so with the materials in hand, I decided the perfect placement would be behind this central campfire where there's this kind of gap in between all the houses. For the design, I wanted to keep it really simple, but I did also want it to be more realistic compared to Minecraft standards. I wanted it to have a little bit of movement and texture in the build, so I based it off of a realistic American bison. To keep it as realistic as possible, I tried to use only stairs and slabs to give it as little of a blocky shape as possible. But it still looks like Minecraft to me, added walls for horns, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So, just like that, we had officially crossed off everything from the checklist, and it was time for the era overview. We built our first settlement, complete with 6 houses and a gate. We built a giant campfire right in the middle, along with a monument to commemorate the era of hunting and gathering, and of course, made some stone tools. So now, all we have left to do is enter year 350, the farming age. But you'll have to wait till next video. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed. And if there's anything you want to see in the next episode, definitely let me know in the comments. And by the way, I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Peace!